on, go live. There we go. Good morning, everybody. It is Social Surge with Fly and Mo. Glad to have you here on this Thursday morning. I'm Mo Regalado. That is Fly Jamerson. We're glad to have you here.
They start the day. Sip their coffee.
It's a chill day in LA, in the law.
In the law. Dr. Fromage has joined us over on the gram. Good morning, Regalado Real Estate. Thanks for joining us. We are talking. Actually, we're continuing the conversation from Tuesday because we were talking about origin stories. And we really didn't get a chance to break down what those origin stories are.
My fault.
And because we figured that there's three different versions of the origin story, right? So we have our seasoned brokers, we have our new brokers, and then of course we have what happens when you rebrand. Or we could even bring up the fact that our good friend Amy Calandrino has gone from having Beyond Commercial, which is her own brand, to now working for Cushman & Wakefield. So there's a whole lot that has to happen when you either move brokerages, join a brokerage, start your own brokerage. So that's a huge, actually that could be its entire conversation all on its own. But today we're unpacking that origin story and what it means to actually have one and to share it with your audience. Fly, take it away.
I also, just to bring up Amy, so I did a cold callers with her. Mm-hmm. And the fun fact and the origin story of even just that relationship. So like the genesis of things that come to be are always fun to look back on. But she's somebody that when I started the series and like nobody knew who I was and I didn't know who anybody was, like I called her really cold. And it's hard. It's hard for me to actually like do a completely cold call now because so many people have seen it. Anyway, I digress. But so the question that I ask on those calls is, what was the best advice you got when you were just starting out? And that is an example of a prompt that you could use to begin to think about how to look back at where you came from and what that meant for you, and then like where you're going. And so because when I think that the origin story is a really great place to start for people who are, just getting started in their content. Just figure out like, okay, so where does the story actually begin? Right. And, but it is difficult to sit down with nothing. And so that's why I sort of bring up this like idea of the prompt. And so we have kind of like on two sides of the coin, we have people who have been in the business for a super long time. Like let's say, I don't know, super long time, like 20, like there are a lot of people.
Years.
Yeah. And then on the opposite end of that, you have people who are just getting started. And so there's two ways that you can approach this. For the senior broker or for like a more seasoned broker, what the kinds of things that you want to pull into your origin story would be things that you've experienced, how you've seen things change over the course of doing business, because especially even within the last year, the last 5 years, especially too, but a 20-year look back, a lot has changed. And the one thing that I do think that brokers of all experiences and ages don't give themselves enough credit for is you actually have the skills. You have the skills and creativity to connect the dots around what some of these things mean. Like when I see people talk, like looking at and interpreting, market insights data trends, all the different kind of conversations that we see on a regular basis, like that's pattern recognition. You are already in the practice of noticing things. You just may not be in the practice of noticing and articulating those things about yourself, right? It's always so much easier to, I think about this with my work all the time. Like when I'm working on writing something for a client, like we're talking, we get the story, they're kind of giving me the details, and I'm like, oh yeah, like that goes together this way, this, we're going to do this and put it this way. Like for me, it's super fun. And then I sit down and I think about how I'm going to write something about my own experiences. And it's so much harder. Like I wrote, I think the most recent post that I wrote, it took me honestly, it took me 2 hours to write. But
well, I think that's the difference between where we get like actual people who want to share their stories. Hey, DB is joining us over on the gram. Thanks for joining us, DB. It's Dwayne. He's joining us. He's driving, so he's listening in. But I think that's the difference between when we are crafting content, right, versus just throwing up AI slop. And that's the difference, right? So some of us look at this as a craft. We look at it as being wordsmiths. We enjoy the written language, and we want to showcase. That's a shirt now. Showcase. We want to showcase our personality, right? And so we want that to come through as we're writing. I want you to be able to hear my voice when I am creating some snarky ass post on LinkedIn, or you see me respond in a way on X, right? I want you to be able to hear exactly what I'm saying in my voice, tone, and style. And we have talked about voice, tone, and style before. We probably are going to have to do another show on it because of the fact that you have to have an established voice, tone, and style for people to, even in writing, for people to be able to differentiate you from everybody else. So as we're talking about your origin story, and we're going to get into the seasoned broker, the new broker, and then of course the reintroduction or the rebrand. Let's start with the seasoned broker fly, because I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. You sent me and in fact you made it was a funny tweet last night about when like all of a sudden like Fly starts texting me between 7 and 8 o'clock my time, which is
your time.
10 o'clock her time. And it's like that's when the little creative gremlins start going. And
I was at an impasse. I was like, well, it was an impasse in a couple of ways, because I don't usually have a moment where I get to choose what I'm going to do with my time.
Yes.
But I was like, I'm going to either get on this X space and listen to these boys talk shop. I'm going to go to bed, or what if I made some content? And so, yeah, but no, because I think about it a lot. Right. And so, but I think that one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is because I have conversations with people all the time who have just like the most insane, like cowboy, like Academy Award winning biopic level stories. And I'm just like, why does nobody know about this?
Yes.
You know what I mean? So, but the question that it always comes back to is, what do I actually talk about and how do I talk about it? So if you are somebody who has been in the business for a long time, first of all, you have decades of deal stories that you could pull back to, right? And so, what, especially for, if you think about, somebody as prolific as Bob, and you want to know what, there are a lot of brokers in this business. Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of Bobs and Bobettes. Oh no, the Bobettes. We need a little.
No, there are absolutely, there's so many people out there with stories that they're just like this treasure trove of information. And especially if we look at like Bob's story, he went through savings and loan crisis. He went through 9/11. He went through the great financial crisis. All this, the .com bubble, like all of this stuff happened. And like, there's always a story that comes out of that. And we have so many people in this industry that are those seasoned brokers that have the experience, longevity. and and either nobody's asked them their story, or they think that this comes back to, we've talked about this quite a bit, not necessarily confidence, but they don't think anybody wants to know that. No, you've got young brokers out here who have 1-2 years under their belt. They want to hear those stories. They want to know, because there's information from that they can glean, and that they can take as their, take as their own, right? And not take as their own as in steal, but like actually absorb it in and learn from it.
Yeah, and I think something that I hear talked about a lot, in not just in this industry but writ large, is that because of the fragmentation and like the fracturing of how people pass around and down information, that we have a wave of brokers who are, before too long they're going to retire, and like without the articulation of their experiences, like there's a huge we have the potential to lose a wealth of knowledge, right? And so the legacy and documentation and history like are all sort of byproducts of things that can come out of telling your story on social media, which ultimately of course is to create opportunities to have conversations, build relationships so that you can transact. So, and again, people do people with people, and people like to know the kinds of things that you've been through because it shows them who you are. And so this is what I want to know. If you are a seasoned broker in this business and inside of your origin story, here are some of the things that I would ask you. I would ask you, how did you get into the business? It's very simple. Like, how did you actually get into this and why? And, talk to me about what was the very first deal that you did? Probably it was not pretty, especially if you're somebody who has had success. That look back to that first thing, that's huge, right? You had to claw your way into this business. And I want to see the grit. I want to see the tenacity. I want to know where you came from so that I can better appreciate and relate to you, now that you're ripping millions of square feet of deals, right? So again, things that you can think about when you're thinking about writing your origin story. Who was your first mentor in this business? Yeah. Who was somebody who showed you what was possible and helped you achieve that? And how did you meet them? And what is something that they said to you that has stuck with you throughout the years? I think that this is something that is applicable to all content. If you're trying to figure out like what should I say, what should I talk about, there's something that someone has said to you, there's something that has happened to you, there's something you've seen, there's something that you've read that is burned in your brain in there, right? That is the basis of a lot of my storytelling right now, and I would, I'm not a broker, I don't make deals, but I would qualify myself as somebody who's being on the early side of the spectrum as opposed to the later, right? Less seasoned.
Well, I'm working with a broker right now who has or had a mentor. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure if the person's still alive, but he has. I'm not going to say the name, but he's like, oh, the isms, the last person's name and then isms, right? The sayings that he has. Yeah. And I'm like, do you have? He's like, oh yeah, he always had tons of things to say, and I'm like, that's great. And we talked about like the fact that this person was his mentor, and it was kind of had to do with his origin story. It was kind of a reintroduction, talking about why he's in the business and stuff like that. And the amount of comments that they got when he mentioned this one person, and they're like, oh man, I remember that dude. He always had something to say, right? Like, so it's who is that mentor that touched you in a way that it stuck, right? Like it was sticky. And then of course, did they have stuff that even if your origin story is not that interesting, but if you had a mentor that was super interesting, like why not share those stories? Those stories are just as much yours as they are theirs. Holly Pennington is joining us over on the gram. Thanks, Holly, for joining us this morning. We are going back over the origin story, and we are talking about the 3 different stories that will be told probably throughout your career.
I love that. In thinking about where all of the different moments that kind of are like define your work in the trajectory of it. I like that.
Questions in the house.
I do, yeah. So looking back to those firsts, and then also, that's a place to begin. Tying into thinking about how you're doing a look back or a reflection, like you do want to think about kind of the arc of the story, right? So, those posts, or that the other thing that I love about exploring origin stories is that all of these things can be broken down into smaller pieces, right? Like you have so many moments, and it might be actually too big of a story to fit into just one thing. And so like encourage people to stretch it out, right? But in terms of the story arc, so we actually have the origin story, but a part of the reason why, like Mo brought up the MCU the other day in, looking at like, oh, like the Spider-Man origin story or like the villain origin story, like we get these like little one-off, movies that spin off from there. But what it does is because we have some context around the greater story, like that kind of deep dive in there is really satisfying for us as a viewer or as a person who has a relationship with you. So, you want to put those first moments in there of where you came from, but then also like start to flesh out the arc a little bit. What was the journey from those first moments to now? And some of the things that you can highlight inside of that would be, I mean, like, I love hearing brokers talk about, just like you said, like, everything that Bob has seen. Or I was just talking to a broker the other day who was, dealing with the foreclosures of the RTC years and like the oil crash that happened in the 1980s and just some really stuff. Like you've seen a lot of market cycles, right? And so, what are your insights, or how have your insights changed, or how has your approach changed? A broker who, and this is just kind of incredible too, like a broker who has experienced, all of those different major moments is going to have a very different story to tell, a very different perspective, a very different experience,
right?
And level of understanding too of their clients. Because that's the other thing too, is this like in the last 20 years that you've been doing business, many of your clients have been in the business as well, on the buy side or on the lease side, right? And like they've been through those things too. And so, how being able to articulate that and being the person who is opening up the space for conversation, it allows you to enter a different starting point of a relationship with your clients. Other things that you could talk about would be like changes in how deals are made, especially around tech. I've been seeing some posts recently where people are showing off old tech. Like I saw this great, man, it's like very Gordon Gekko, like Glenn Ross, this like guy in a car in New York. He's got a phone that looks like it's
I saw that. Yeah,
that one. First of all, that post, I don't know who I have to go back and find it, but that was a post that was strange because a lot of people outside of his vertical like found that post and were like kind of dragging him. Did you see that part of it?
I did see that. I thought that was absolute. Well, and that was the thing. Like they were like, "This is I saw some of the snarky comments. Real quick, Mulzer Development, Mr. Zach Mulzer has joined us over on the gram and talking about origin stories. He is a perfect example of what you want to do for your origin story, and especially when we're talking about new brokers or new developments. If you're not following Zach on Instagram, you absolutely freaking need to, because what they're doing with the Aladdin Hotel is exactly everything that you need to do. And he's really lucky that he has Annie with him to storyboard everything. And they're doing it in video form, right? They're not doing that long form written content, which is what we're kind of talking about more on LinkedIn, but they are documenting the process. And think about the fact that if you had the ability to document the process when you started, we look at Bob Knackle, and he really did kind of do that with, he's got all these, archives really of content from, he's got pictures and letters and just all this information, right? Which is the documentation of the process. And we love to see that stuff. with regard to that guy that was on the phone in his car, that was such a tip. That was like such an 80s shot, right? It was so cool. It was so good. But you are correct. There were people that were not in the vertical, that had nothing to do with commercial real estate, didn't have anything to do with that were kind of dragging him in the comments. And that's not, don't let that deter you from telling your origin story. Don't let that stop you just because something happened to somebody else on social media, stop you from sharing your story. Your story is just as important as anybody else's.
What I do want to say as well is that I did see
historical hoarder.
I love it. No, and there's no bad version of that. It only can be good. Even I'll have to find that post and take another look and be articulate about it. But there were also people who were like, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember having to like get into a car in New York City in the 1980s and just like the, what it was like to do deals back then. And it's not that way anymore. And so contrasting the past versus the present, thinking about those milestone moments of all of the first, or what was the biggest, what was the hardest, like especially if you've had success, you have an incredible platform to be able to talk about the missteps and the mistakes that got you there. And not that you should have a chip on your shoulder about it, but if you came from a school of hard knocks, it's respectful. You know what I mean? Like it's
relatable, right? People like we've all had trials and tribulations in our lives. And nothing we love more than to actually hear that other people have the same freaking trials and tribulations, right? We love a comeback story too. So there's always challenges. There's always challenges. And so now as we move from seasoned broker to the newer brokers, a lot of times newer brokers will tell us, so I don't have anything to say. Okay. Why did you get into brokerage? What was the impetus? Who is the person that told you to show up today? Like, what did you see? For some people, it's they watched Glenn Ross. For other people, it's the whole, maybe their mom or dad was in the business.
I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like, which honestly, like, I say that a little dismissively, but that's a real entry point for people.
That is a real entry point for a lot of people. And let's see. I would say hi, but
I meant that because Danielle commented on the cold call video, and she was like, "Give me a call." I can't remember what you said exactly, but like, "Give me a call," and I'm like, "I have your number." Stay frosty means like stay ready, like stay, like keep, don't relax.
Maybe Fly needs to start a new series of flyisms.
Yeah, I've been told that sometimes I say things that don't make sense.
And you're like, it makes sense in my head.
But Zach Mulzer is a great example of somebody. He's 24. He's 24, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't been doing this for decades, right? But his content is all about now it's becoming more about what he is doing in front of him, but it's not about previous accomplishments. No. Like the Aladdin isn't finished. You know what I mean? And so it's
building in the public space in real time.
And it's about why. It's about why. It's about what he it's about what he and the rest of the people on his team and in his company and in his greater like network and his investors. It's about the possibility that they see in Kansas City. And it's very tied to Zach's ambition as a developer, but it's also tied very specifically to purpose and to place. And, I have seen a couple of other, nobody necessarily going as aggressively as Zach is about this, but, I've seen a couple people in, markets like Columbus, Ohio, and markets like Madison, Wisconsin, and, some of these, I mean, I'm not sure entirely how to qualify them or articulate the kinds of markets that they are, but they're brand new in the business, and they moved to those places for opportunity. Bro, you guys are pioneers. You're pioneers. That's what this is. It's like a good old John Steinbeck novel, but it's like you made a decision to do this and do this for a reason. And bros, like, come on, like we love an underdog. You know what I mean? Like I moved to Columbus, Ohio for these two reasons, and here's what they are. I wanted an opportunity for my family, and I see opportunity in this community. Like, and that's a very that don't post that, right? But you know what I mean? But it's just like
that word for
if
word.
you can break down if you break things down to like kind of the essential parts of the story, I mean, you are really actually staking a claim. And
Well, and I think also just the excitement, right? Are you excited about what you're doing? Are you scared? Like, what is the emotion tied to what you're doing right now? And it might feel stupid, and it might feel vulnerable for you for sharing that. And you might get a couple people around the office like, oh, who cares what you write on LinkedIn? Or I saw what you posted on X. Yeah, but you saw it. I'm in your brain now, right? Yeah, you saw it. I didn't see your shit.
And God, just kill me with the jealousy, but just
It's there.
I really do. I do believe that you have nothing to lose. And I know that people are, if they're new, they're like, well, I don't have a track record. I don't have results. I don't have any of these things. Bro, this is the same thing that you got going on your cold calls. You've never sold a building before, and you're picking up the phone to call people to sell their building. I mean, like that's crazy, but people do it all the time, and you build those relationships too. And so, you have to articulate all of the time already to your prospects, that your newness is a differentiator that is going to give you a level of drive and a level of capacity. And it's an entirely different set of circumstances and value that you would bring to brokering a deal that somebody else, wouldn't necessarily have, right? And I'm not meaning to pit seasoned brokers against new brokers. It's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just like, the reality is that you need to accept the fact that you're new. You need to accept the fact that you don't have 20 years of the business under your belt, that you haven't ripped, 5 million square feet of leasing spaces, right? Like there's no point in trying to hide that. And you will actually do yourself a disservice by trying to cover that up, because nobody wants somebody who is just putting on an act. And again, other people are in the same position as you. One of my favorite things that I see coming out of a younger or newer or greener generation of brokers that are getting really active online is that in 20 years, they will still be in the business, and they will have relationships with the people who started at the same time as them. And I see these young guys trying to figure out ways to help each other and do deals together. Yeah. And like, it's not like you're bros, but it's more than that. Like, you're forming the kinds of relationships by telling your story, by being relatable. Like, like there's a handful of brokers who are very vocal about managing their lives as young people in the business, but also young fathers and young mothers. Yeah. And, the other first of all, not only will your peers like find that relatable and like you start conversations and start forming relationships because you both were up until 2 a.m. holding a crying kid, older brokers, more experienced brokers are going to see that. They're going to have useful advice for you. They're going to understand a little bit more about your situation. The other thing that I think that we haven't touched on too is that not just creating opportunity between peers who are also new, but creating opportunity for you to get pulled into circles of people who do have that more experience. I mean, look at you and me, right? Like, like I be out here trying to do this on my own, and that would not be pretty, not at all. You know what I mean? And so that partnership between the different generations of the business are also possible, and a way for you to get where you need to go quicker if you're new.
And not for nothing, I'm just going to pop this in here. This is also the reason why back to office is important. I know there's a lot of people that are just like, it's remote work, that's all we're going to do. But back to office is so important because you're not going to have that water cooler talk. Even though lots of people bitch about the water cooler talk and that's a waste of company hours, but you're forming those relationships, that network, those conversations, and you're finding common ground. So for all the young brokers that are out there, as you are back in the office, make sure you take time to talk to the older brokers. And even if they're crusty and cranky and whatever, like
I love them.
Like strike up a conversation. I mean, it's literally you're cold calling your coworkers, right? You're trying to get
I did do that.
common ground, right? You're trying to find something that you can learn from them, and they are a wealth of knowledge, a treasure trove of information. Don't let them leave this industry not realizing the impact that they've made.
Sorry, I just realized that what time it was, and I have like at least like 15 more minutes to talk about this. But last night I was like, I am gonna be tight and I'm gonna be focused. Just real quickly to sort of finish both sides of the coin here, and we didn't quite we talked a little about the reintroduction post, but we can continue the conversation from there. Origin story articulation for a newer broker. We talked about, why are you doing this? Where are you doing this? What is your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? You can talk, you also have a very, very specific perspective on your market, on your particular asset class, on your particular community, that other people don't have, right? And so don't dismiss the perspective that you do have because you lack tenure. It's not going to help you in the long run. You can be quite honest and try to communicate where you actually see yourself adding value. Talk about the relationships that I just saw this great post from a local broker who's fairly new. And it was just a picture of her working with a broker who is a legend in this community and is totally invisible online. Like if you haven't been here and like if you're not really deep on the inside, like you don't know this dude's name. But there, so the picture of her working with him together, just like candidly in the office, slam dunk, because I'm like, wow, that was like a huge testimonial to the fact that like, okay, maybe she's new. She hasn't been ripping a ton of transactions necessarily. She's getting a lot of traction and it's going really well. But she's working side by side with people who have deep knowledge and understanding of this market. Right. And so again, sharing with people what you're doing, and it was just like a candid, like one-off moment. Right. What's your personal background? Are you pivoting from another career? Why did you ultimately decide to do this? There's this guy also too in this market who like sold printers or like sold copy printing services. Like he was a sales guy for like a print shop.
Right.
But he had a commission cap. He met it really quickly. And he's like, well, this isn't going to work. Why should I keep working if I can't make any more money? He switched and now he's doing industrial real estate in Louisiana. He got market share like in no time. Right. And so again, like you don't need to have tenure to accomplish incredible things. If you have a why, like, and you're making it happen, talk about that. Right. Another benefit, I will just say, knowing now that it could be another 10-minute conversation, is that if you, no, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pull the plug because I can't.
So here's a prompt for our friends who are still with us. Think about this. If someone found you for the first time today, what's the story that they would hear? Right? So that's the prompt for you. If someone found you for the first time today, what's the story that they'd hear? What's changed in your business since the last time you shared your story, right? If you haven't shared your origin story, now's the perfect time. If you've already shared your origin story, now's the perfect time. You have a different audience. There are different people reading your content. There are different people who are going to be looking for you, connecting with you. It is okay to reshare how you got started in the business. And because it's generally emotional and personal, it absolutely smashes when it comes to people reading your content. It does. They're all bangers.
They make me happy to use my words.
All right, everybody. We will see you back here on Tuesday. Don't forget that we have Social Mastery VIP. It is our group. We'd love for you to be in there. We've got lots of fun stuff here.
I think I can't hear you anymore because this music.
You can't hear me at all?
Oh, I didn't hear you. Now I can. I was just like, what are you saying? Okay.
Social Mastery VIP, it's our school group. We'd love to have you guys in there, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday. Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.